Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Tonight we have two stories, two real accounts that are as bone-chilling as they are baffling. These stories took place during brutal, unforgiving winters. Winters so cold they could freeze the blood in your veins. So if you're ready to hear about some truly terrifying winter encounters, grab a blanket, turn down the lights and settle in. Because tonight we're diving headfirst into a world of snow, ice, and unimaginable horror. Our first story takes us deep into the isolated wilderness of Alaska, where a group of 5 friends, Mark, Jessica, Chris, Emily, and Josh, decided to embark on a New Year's Eve getaway. They rented a secluded cabin nestled high in the remote Alaskan backcountry. The plan was simple. Ring in the new year, surrounded by towering pines, a roaring fire, and the pristine beauty of untouched snow. They'd snowmobile in, spend a few days enjoying winter sports and each other's company, and then head back before the New Year's celebrations began in earnest. The first day went off without a hitch. The friends arrived at the trailhead early, unloaded their gear, and started up their snowmobiles. The crisp winter air vibrated with the roar of the engines as they set off into the white expanse. The trail was well marked, winding through dense forests of spruce and fir. Sunlight glinted off the snow, creating a dazzling spectacle that made them feel like they were the only people in the world. The journey to the cabin was a winter wonderland adventure, and they arrived exhilarated, their cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. The cabin itself was a rustic, charming A-frame built entirely of logs. A plume of smoke curled lazily from its chimney, a welcoming sign on that frigid afternoon. They parked their snowmobiles, eager to escape the biting wind. Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting, with a crackling fire already going in the stone fireplace. The scent of pine and wood smoke filled the air, and the friends quickly made themselves at home, unpacking their bags and claiming beds in the cozy bedrooms upstairs. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the snow, they gathered in the main room, its large windows providing a panoramic view of the wilderness beyond. The wind howled outside, but inside it was warm and bright, the flames of the fire casting a flickering glow on their faces. They shared stories, laughter echoing through the cabin as they sipped hot chocolate and played board games. But as the night deepened and the storm outside intensified, a strange unease began to settle over the group. It started subtly, with whispers of cold air in rooms that should have been warm, and the feeling of being watched from the darkened corners of the cabin. They dismissed it at first, attributing it to the storm and their imaginations. But, as the hours passed, the strange occurrences grew more frequent and more unsettling. One by one, each of the friends experienced something unexplainable. Mark, while reading a book by the fire, could have sworn he saw a figure dart past the doorway, a fleeting glimpse of movement that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Jessica, while washing dishes, felt a cold hand on her shoulder, but when she turned around, there was no one there. Chris, while walking down the hallway, heard his name whispered, clear as day, but when he called out, there was no answer. Emily, the most skeptical of the group, tried to rationalize the strange happenings, but even she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It was Josh, however, who had the most terrifying encounter. While sleeping, he was awakened by an icy breath on his face. He opened his eyes to find a shadowy figure leaning over him, its features obscured by the darkness. He cried out, scrambling back in terror, but the figure vanished into thin air. Shaken and terrified, the friends gathered in the main room, sharing their experiences in hushed whispers. The storm raged outside, the wind howling like a banshee, trapping them inside the cabin with whatever unseen entity was tormenting them. They tried to contact the outside world, but the storm had knocked out the phone lines and their cell phones had no signal. They were completely cut off, isolated and alone in the heart of the Alaskan wilderness, at the mercy of whatever was haunting them. As the night wore on, the strange occurrences escalated. Objects moved on their own. Doors slammed shut, seemingly of their own accord, and disembodied whispers seemed to taunt them from the shadows. They huddled together for safety, their fear palpable in the close confines of the cabin. They tried to convince themselves that there was a logical explanation, but deep down they knew that something sinister was at play. Then, just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, the power went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. Panic surged through the group as they fumbled for flashlights, their beams dancing nervously in the darkness. They huddled together, their faces illuminated by the flickering light, their eyes wide with terror. Our second story takes us to the icy plains of Minnesota, where the winters are long and harsh, and the frozen lakes hold secrets buried deep beneath their icy surfaces. This is the story of Peter, a solitary man who found solace in the solitude of ice fishing. Every winter, as soon as the lakes froze over, Peter would pack up his gear, his trusty fishing rod, a thermos of hot coffee, and a heart full of quiet anticipation, and head out onto the ice. He'd find a secluded spot, drill a hole, and wait patiently for the fish to bite. It was a solitary pursuit, but Peter didn't mind. He enjoyed the silence, the vastness of the frozen landscape, and the feeling of being completely alone with his thoughts. The biting wind, the crunch of his boots on the ice, the occasional cry of a distant bird. These were the sounds that filled his world when he was out on the lake. He knew the ice like the back of his hand, every crack and crevice, every pressure ridge and thin spot. He respected its power, its unforgiving nature, and he never ventured out without taking every precaution. One particularly frigid January morning, Peter decided to visit a lake he hadn't been to in years, Crystal Lake, so named for its clear, pristine waters. It was a remote spot, miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a snowmobile trail that wound through dense forests and snow-covered fields. The sun was just beginning to rise as Peter arrived, casting a golden glow on the snow-dusted trees. He unloaded his gear, his breath forming clouds of vapor in the frigid air, and surveyed the scene. The lake was a sheet of pristine white, stretching out before him like an untouched canvas. He could see his breath, a steady plume of white against the blue sky. He could hear the silence, broken only by the crunch of his boots on the snow and the distant cry of a crow. He felt a sense of peace settle over him, a sense of being completely alone, and yet completely at home in this winter wonderland. He set up his gear with practiced ease, drilling a hole in the thick ice with his auger. He lowered his line, baiting it with a juicy worm, and settled down to wait, his thermos of coffee steaming beside him. The sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the snow with hues of pink and gold. The air was still, the silence broken only by the occasional chirp of a chickadee. Peter sat there, lost in his thoughts, his eyes scanning the horizon, when he noticed something strange. At the far end of the lake, near a cluster of snow-laden trees, a figure appeared. It was just a silhouette at first, a dark shape against the blinding white of the snow. Peter squinted, trying to make out more detail. It looked like a woman, dressed in a long, flowing coat. He couldn't understand what she was doing out there, so far from the shore in such frigid temperatures. He watched her for a while, curious. But as the minutes passed and she made no move to leave, a sense of unease began to creep over him. He tried to rationalize it, telling himself that she was probably just an ice fisher like himself, enjoying the solitude of the frozen lake. But there was something about the way she stood, so still and silent, that sent a shiver down his spine. He decided to pack up his gear and move to a different spot, just to be safe. He reeled in his line, his hands stiff with cold, and began to gather his belongings. As he did so, he glanced back at the figure. She was closer now, much closer than she should have been, considering he hadn't heard a single footstep on the ice. He could see her more clearly now, and his blood ran cold. Thank you for watching tonight. If you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments which story you found most unsettling. Until next time, stay safe out there. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more spine-chilling tales. Stay warm and